Well, welcome everybody. Glad you're here. If you have a Bible today, would you open up to the Gospel of Luke, chapter 17? Take a Bible, open up your phone, tablet, whatever you brought today, but find Luke's Gospel, chapter 17. We're beginning a series today. You just saw the video bumper for all of us, kind of introducing this idea of being offended. We live in a culture today where it seems like everybody is easily offended. You could be offended by a nativity on somebody's front lawn during Christmas time. My daughter told me that there was a group on campus that was wanting to have a party called in the theme of holidays, and you could dress up, you and your date, as any holiday you wanted to, but if you came as Thanksgiving, you couldn't be an Indian nor a pilgrim because they didn't want to offend anybody. Now, let me just ask you, if you don't go as an Indian or a pilgrim on Thanksgiving, what do you go as? Corn? I mean, I just don't understand how you go, right? But there's something about us just real sensitive. Even a year ago when I was thinking about this particular teaching series and just observing some things in our culture that just showed, man, we're easily offended today. The group PETA, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, were suggesting some alternative slogans for us that would be slightly less offensive, right? So that rather than bring home the bacon, you would bring home the bagels, they suggested. Because we don't want to offend any animal lovers out there. That rather than taking the bull by the horns, you take the flower by the thorns, which would probably offend every gardener out there, right? Why you want to do that to the poor flowers, right? So there's just this sense in which you scratch your head at times and you go, really? Now, truthfully, there are some things that are truly difficult to deal with, and there are some truly offensive things toward people that wound at such a deep level that in our culture, people are threatening, they're fighting, even taking life in the name of, you have offended me. Now, please hear me. I'm not just talking about social media and politics and relations in our communities. I'm talking about you can be offended in your own circle of friends. Your friends could be thoughtless, and you could get offended by that. I was talking with one of my daughters and one of her friends, and they were talking about how this particular other friend of theirs had invited one of them to go to their wedding shower, but didn't invite her to go to the wedding. Now, I didn't even know that was a problem, right? But apparently it's a thing. If you're going to invite me to your shower and take my gift, let me come to your wedding, right? But it's offensive if you only invite me to the wedding. No man even knew that was a thing, but apparently it is. Your friends maybe have offended you. Anybody here married? All I got to ask is if you're married, that means you've been offended, right? Because your spouse doesn't see it the way you see it, and they don't take your side, and you're like, gosh, they don't respond to you emotionally or physically like you wanted them to. Anybody here got a spouse that pouts? Don't point, but right, you got a spouse that pouts. Some dude just put his arm around his wife. Unfortunate for you to raise your hand like that at just that moment, right? Y'all know what I'm talking about. It happens. You love each other, but it happens that you hurt each other. Even at church, you can get offended. My dad, when I was a little kid, had an experience that he relayed to me. I don't even remember it, but he was preaching, and I grew up in a church where at the end of the service, the preacher went to the back door, which was actually the front of the church. Y'all remember this? Any of y'all raised in a church like this? Preacher went to the back door, and everybody had to go past the preacher to get out, right? And hopefully you shook hands and attaboy preacher, way to go preacher, you stepped on them toes today, right? I mean, stuff like that. That's the kind of things that you would hear. But on this particular occasion, one of my dad's first churches, this lady walked out and just turned her shoulder and said, huh. And he grabbed her by the arm and said, ma'am, come back here. What happened? And she said, you hurt my feelings today. And so he, for several minutes, futilely tried to ascertain what it was and how it was that he had hurt her feelings, and she was not budging. That was that. And so he got frustrated, and he said to her, well, you are a Christian, aren't you? And she says, yes, I am. And he said, well, now, as a Christian, that means you died with Christ, haven't you? She said, well, yes, I have. Well, he said, well, if you died with Christ, how can you have feelings? Because I hadn't met a corpse yet that had feelings. Now, if y'all ever wonder where all of my sensitivity comes from, I get it from my daddy, right? I'm just saying to you, the preacher probably will offend you. It can happen, right? It can happen that we get offended. If you were to look up the definition of offense, It means to cause to feel upset or annoyed or resentful. Some synonyms include hurt feelings, displeased, distressed, you wounded, injured, or angered me. Do you know anybody? Do you know anybody who's angry, wounded, upset, hurt? Well, of course. Who's not? Right? Offended. We all are. So over the next 4 or 5 weeks, we're going to start answering some questions just about what's going on in our hearts and in our culture. What is an offense exactly? And is it a good thing or a bad thing to embrace offense? How do I keep from being offended, right? And then we're going to kind of turn the page and say, well, what about should I offend people or should I not offend people? Is there ever a time when a Christian will offend a person or other people? And what should you do about that, okay? We're going to talk about that over the next 4 or 5 weeks, so lean in and let's hear what God has to say. Now, today we're going to talk about this idea of what exactly is an offense, and is it a good thing or a bad thing? Okay, that's the idea. And so let's lean in a little bit. I gave you the dictionary definition, at least one of them, of what an offense is, but let's dig a little deeper. What exactly does it mean to be offended, not just culturally, but biblically? Okay? Biblically. The definition in English today predominantly is, man, you hurt my feelings. You made me upset. You offended me. You said something I don't like. But if you were to dig deeper in the background of that word, our English word offend comes from a French word, which in the 14th century carried this idea of meaning to sin against or transgress or antagonize, which came from a Latin root, which meant to hit or to strike against, figuratively to push somebody or cause them to stumble or fall or to displease them or to trespass against them or to provoke them. But that Latin root actually comes from a Greek word that's in Matthew 17, or Luke 17, where we are today, okay? Here's Luke 17. Luke 17 is where we'll be. Make up your mind, preacher, I'm offended already, right? Luke 17 is where we'll be, all right? And I want to read first from the King James Version. And some of y'all are like, hallelujah, right? Because you're offended when I read from the New American Standard, which we'll read from in a minute. But the King James Version says, then Jesus said unto the disciples, it is impossible, but that offenses will come. But woe unto him through whom they come. Jesus said, it's impossible, but that offenses, that's our word, right? Offenses would come. Okay? King James Version. New American Standard translation says this. He said to his disciples, it is inevitable that stumbling blocks, same word translated differently, stumbling blocks come, but woe to him through whom they come. Now, this idea of stumbling block in the New American Standard captures really a closer equivalent to the root of the Greek word, right? Offense really captures more of a more 16th century on forward idea of the word, but stumbling block really captures the heart of the Greek root, which is transliterated. The word stumbling block is our word scandalize. Oh, you done scandalized me now. You've caused a scandal here. But here's what that word means. You've caused a stumbling block. At its root, it means it was used for the bait that would trigger a trap. That's what the word scandalize or stumbling block was. It was the bait that once it was tripped, you were trapped. An animal was trapped. It also meant to place an impediment, something that would cause you to trip up and fall in your faith walk. Okay, so Jesus said it's inevitable that sometimes people are going to do things that can cause you to respond in a way that becomes trapped in sin, that cause you to stumble in your faith. That's the original idea of this word. I'll give you a couple examples just from reading through the Bible recently, where King Saul was king of Israel, first king, and he was the man. He was taller, handsome than everybody else, but he had a giant that kept taunting him and his army in the valley of Elah, right? And so David, this little squirt, chomp, young punk, shows up one day to bring some cheese and crackers to his older brothers, sees the giant, hears the giant, in God's name goes and defeats the giant with a slingshot. Y'all remember the story? He kills the giant, Israel is on fire, man. They are fired up. And so the cheerleaders, the women, the culture, the cheerleaders cheer this cheer. Saul has killed his thousands and David has killed his, how many? Tens of thousands. Saul has killed his thousands, David has killed his tens of thousands. And everybody loved that cheer except one dude. Who does not like that cheer? Saul, man, they only give me 1,000. Man, they ain't giving me my love. What? Right? He's offended. He's hurt. Because David is getting more respect, more honor than he's getting. So watch this. Because Saul was offended by what David was being praised as, Saul, for the rest of his life, tried to kill David. Because he was offended. Some girl said something, trying to praise both Saul and David, but what happened next was Saul tripped over that and was offended and felt slighted. So David spent most of his life on the run from this guy, Saul. He wound up living out in the wilderness a lot of times, and he and his band of men, powerful men, hundreds, sometimes thousands of men, were living on the run, but they just lived off the land, and so they found themselves on the run, living one time in the land of this guy that was owned by this guy named Nabal. And Nabal had lots of flocks, and so David and his men just living out in the country in tents, they just kind of formed a human wall all around Nabal's land so that no wolves, no bears, no coyotes, no lions came in and destroyed any of his livestock. And so they were really protected. They were protected. Now, they didn't have a contract. They didn't have an agreement, nothing like that. They were just there, taken care of by being there, helping the shepherds. Now, when it came time to shear the sheep, translated, payday. When payday comes, Nabal's shearing his sheep, and David sends a couple of his guys to Nabal and says, hey, dude, we've been kind of out here, working for you kind of on the down low, and man, we've kind of helped your shepherds out a good bit. Is there any chance you might show us a little love, pay us a little bit? And Nabal says, who do you think you are? I ain't paying you squat. I don't owe you anything. Now, they go back and tell David, and David gets, guess what? Offended. He's ticked. Who that joker thinks he is? He gets all his men, they get all their weapons together, and they're going to kill Nabal. Why? Because David's offended. He disrespected me. You upset me. And had Nabal's wife not gone out to meet David and said to David, you are a man of God, and God has anointed you king, and we know it. But if you go kill that guy whose name literally means fool, all right, this woman was married to a man named Fool. You ain't got it as bad as you think you do. You could have married him, right? She says, if you go kill this fool, blood's going to be on your hand, and it's going to bring trouble and pain to you the rest of your life. And David said, thank God you just talked me off the ledge. Because sure shooting, I was about to take him out. Okay? So the etymology of the word is, we think now today is, man, you made me mad. You ticked me off. You don't agree with me. I don't even like what you're doing. I don't like what you're saying. But before it was that, it really meant you caused me some type of physical harm. You pushed me down. You caused me to stumble. You hit me. You struck me. But before that, it meant that you took the bait, and when you got hurt, you retaliated, and it led you to being trapped. You stumbled and you didn't live by faith. You got offended and started living by your flesh. Okay, you feel that? That's the idea of offense. Jesus said it is inevitable that offenses will come. You cannot avoid being hurt. You cannot avoid being annoyed at some level every single day. Somebody is going to give you an occasion to take the bait and to trip up in your faith walk, but don't take it. It's going to happen. It's inevitable that your spouse is going to offend you. They love you like crazy, but they're going to offend you. You listen, kids, your parents love you like crazy, but they're going to say something stupid, do something wrong, wear the wrong thing, and you're going to be embarrassed, and it's going to offend you, and they did not mean to. Parents, your kids are probably going to offend you at some point. They're not going to come home enough. They're not going to call enough, include you enough. They don't talk to you enough. Look, he's 2. He'll eventually get there. He'll eventually talk, but let's give him some time, right? Well, I just don't know if he likes me. Give it some time, but it's going to happen. your friends, your boss, your coworkers, your preacher. You're going to get offended. It's inevitable that these things come. You can't keep from being offended, but what you do next matters. Now, what do you do next when you've been offended? Our culture, it seems to me, says, hey, dude, embrace that. Embrace the offense. Man, take that thing to heart. And it's almost like we're looking for occasions to be offended, and I don't have Bible verses for this, but can I give you just my observations of what it seems like to me? It seems like to me we're almost being encouraged to maintain our offense, because if you're offended, it means I don't have to talk to you. I don't have to get to know you. I don't have to have a conversation with you. All I got to do is say, I'm offended. And that cuts you off, and it just keeps us drifting further apart. Whenever you say, I'm offended, it means that you're justified in your anger, and whatever you do next, you're not responsible for, because you've been offended and you've got to shut your offender down. So, if you need to march or riot or bomb or run over, it's justified because you were offended by what happened, and it's your job to silence that voice. It's almost like we're being encouraged to embrace the idea of being offended, because when you're offended now, you are in a place of power. Look, if you can be offended loudly enough and have enough people join in, you can shut a business down. You can make somebody lose their job. You can have history erased. It's actually in the interest of some people to keep us all offended so that they stay relevant, watching them, listening to them, following them. So in our culture, we're being encouraged, hey, embrace offense. The more offended you can be, the more powerful you are, the more status you can have, the more right you have to do or say whatever you want to in your marriage, in your friendship, at school, at work, wherever. But God is saying to you today, don't fall for the bait in that trap. Don't let what our culture is doing become your norm, so that you stumble and you stop walking by faith in your marriage, in your relationship with your brother and sister, your mama, your daddy, so that you stop walking by faith with friends who are going to hurt you. Your partner is going to do something thoughtlessly. Don't you take that bait and shipwreck your faith. Why is it so dangerous to be offended? I want to give you 3 Bible verses that are kind of give us the reasons why I think being offended, embracing offense, and holding on to it is very, very dangerous for you. The first is Proverbs 18, verse 19, where it says this: a brother offended, somebody that you love, somebody that you're close to, family. A brother offended is harder to be won than a strong city. And contentions are like the bars of a citadel. Just those words, offended and contention, and the imagery that it is creating. A strong, well-fortified city, a citadel, a castle with bars. Whenever you get offended, if you embrace that offense, you hurt my feelings, you trespassed against me, you hurt me, you caused me harm. You embrace that, all of a sudden you start building walls up. You start building up defenses, well fortified, and now I'm not interested in being reconciled to you. What I am interested in doing is offending you right back. Right, you see that? That contentions, this back and forth, quarreling physically, verbally, whatever, this back and forth is like the bars of a citadel. Now, what is a citadel? A citadel is like a castle, a fortress. And the bars keep the bad guys out. And so whenever you've been offended, you start putting up your defenses and you're going to keep everybody out. You're not going to let them get close to you. But here's the danger of the imagery. Yes, it keeps the bad guys out, but guess what it does at the same time? It keeps you locked in. Have y'all ever seen one of these old-timey war movies where, they're trying to take a fort or try to, get into a castle or some city's got a wall around it and they can't do it. And so what does the enemy do? A lot of times they'll just sit back, surround the city and chill. And they'll wait. No, they can't get in, but the people on the inside can't get out. And it may take a little while. It may take a hot minute, but eventually they're going to get hungry up in there. Eventually they're going to need something up in there. And eventually they'll starve to death or start killing each other up in there. Because the walls that you thought were protecting you actually became a prison that enslaves you. And so Proverbs is saying, listen, one of the reasons why it's dangerous for you to hold on to offenses is because it leads you to living a lonely life. You isolate yourself and you end up living alone. Do you know anybody who, whenever they get offended, they automatically cut you off? Man, I know a few people like that. Can I just say, they're miserable. They'll never have long-term friends. It's a miracle that they have anybody close to them. It just leads to loneliness and isolation. Okay? Give you another verse. 2 Corinthians chapter 2, verses 10 and 11. Another verse says, but whom you forgive anything. Now, forgive is going to occur 4 times in this first verse. But one whom you forgive anything, I forgive also. For indeed what I have forgiven, if I have forgiven anything, I did it for your sakes in the presence of Christ. He wants us to forgive. Next verse says this, so that, here's why we forgive, so that no advantage would be taken of us by Satan, for we are not ignorant of his schemes. Now, we've talked about this idea of Satan taking advantage of us. What we've learned over the last few weeks is that word advantage means you give him an inch. You give him a little opening in your life, and he seeks to advance that and take advantage. When you give the devil an inch, he doesn't try to take a mile. He tries to take over. Okay? So we've talked about that, but here's what he said. Hey, don't let the devil take advantage of you, because we are not ignorant of his schemes. Do you see it? That word scheme right there, we're not ignorant of his game plan. We're not ignorant of what he's up to. We're not ignorant about what he's about. What is the devil about? Here's the devil's strategy. Here's his game. Divide you and devour you. Divide you so he can devour you. That's what he is about. He wants to keep us divided so that he can devour us. He wants you to get offended and stay offended. He wants you to be and then remain offended, to be walled off, divided, refusing to forgive. Paul says, man, let's forgive. That's what God does. The enemy says, don't forgive, man. Be broke off, be mad, be bitter. That's what the devil does, so that he can steal, kill, and destroy everything about you. And so can I just ask you, look, just me and you, just you and God, really. Is the devil right now, does he have you divided, separated from somebody because of offensive things that have happened, maybe to you or back and forth? Are you divided off from somebody, family member, friend, spouse, parents, kids, whatever? And the devil is taking over and ruining everything about your family. It's his strategy. The longer you stay offended, the more you play into the enemy's hands. And so, listen, God says don't embrace the offense. It'll lead you to be lonely and alone, but it also leads you into the enemy's hands. But here's the third verse, Hebrews 12, verse 15. See to it that no one comes short of the grace of God, so the grace of God, here's what it looks like, that no root of bitterness springing up causes trouble, and by it many be defiled. He doesn't want you to miss God's grace and act in grace. And here's what it looks like for you to miss it. There's a root of bitterness that starts to grow up in your heart, becomes full-blown, and by it brings trouble, and many people get defiled. The writer of Hebrews is saying, listen, if you embrace offense, it's going to ruin everything about your life. It's going to ruin your relationships. That word trouble, it means that people around you, the crowd around you is stirred up in a negative way. You begin to leak over on them, and some people get offended at your offense. It means that people will become defiled. That word defiled means that they're polluted. They begin to feel the annoyance that you feel, and it's not good, and they begin to push back from you. The picture I get in my mind is poison ivy. Anybody here allergic to poison ivy? I'm allergic to poison ivy. If I look at poison ivy, I'll catch it. If you have it and we touch, I got it. Okay, so here's the idea. Your bitterness is like poison ivy. Everybody you touch gets it too, and then it just starts to drive them nuts. And so what they'll do is they'll start doing to you what I do to poison ivy. I stay away. Your relationships are hampered because you're bitter with a poisoned root. Christy and I were traveling this past week, and we were listening to a podcast that someone suggested to us, and the idea of the podcast said how to have a better sex life. Now, what man is not going to lean into that, right? And so your expectation, guys, about that is, we finna hear something right now. And the guy starts talking about, who are you angry with? I thought we were talking about sex and love. Because whoever you're angry at, you're bitter at, and that unforgiveness in your heart shuts you down from being able to have the best intimacy you could have. So one of the steps in actually being a better lover is to forgive. Come on, you ain't even thought about that. Me either. It's killing every aspect of your relationship. God wants your spirit to be open, but your bitterness has you closed. And it doesn't have to be bitterness at your spouse. Your heart only has so much room, and bitterness will take over. Okay? It'll ruin your prayer life. Being bitter will ruin your prayer life. We oftentimes say the Lord's Prayer together, and the roughest part of saying that prayer together is when we get to that part where we have to talk about debts or trespasses, and you don't know which one to say. Because some of us were raised forgiving our debts as we forgive our debtors, and others of us were raised forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. So we're real good up to that point, and then it becomes, and forgive us our... Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Y'all know what I'm talking about? Y'all ever done it? Come on. Y'all know what I'm saying? But sometimes that tricky part of that prayer is more than just which word we're going to say. Can I just remind you what he said? Forgive us our trespasses against you in the same way that we forgive people who have trespassed against us. Have you thought about what you're praying? Father, forgive me for the way I've violated you and done you wrong, in the same way that I forgive my preacher, my partner, my parents. The way I forgive them, God, that's the way I want you to forgive me. And at the end of the prayer, after you say, yours is the kingdom, power, and glory forever, amen, right? We stop right there, but don't stop. Jesus didn't quit. Matthew 6, 14 and 15 say this. For if you forgive others for their transgressions against you, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. But if you do not forgive others, then your Father will not forgive your transgressions. Do you see that? Do you understand how staying offended and bitter poisons your prayers? Don't stay broken off. Don't stay. It ruins your mental and physical health. A bitter root produces bitter fruit. It poisons your thinking and your physical well-being. Some people say bitterness is like drinking poison expecting the other person to die. Y'all have heard that, right? I drink the poison, but I'm hoping you're going to die. It doesn't work that way. You hold on to bitterness, you're the one dying. Jesus told a story about how grace works. He said, the kingdom of heaven's like this in Matthew 18. He says, kingdom of heaven's like this. It's like this king who had these people that owed him money. And he called them in one day to settle his accounts. And this one guy rolled in, and he had been a very, very poor steward. He had not been a good businessman. He had leveraged himself and then double leveraged himself until he owed, in our terms, we'll just go with $1 billion. There's no way this guy's ever going to pay that money back. And yet he says to the king, please be patient with me. I swear I'll pay you back. And the king is like, there ain't no way. Not in 100 lifetimes you can't pay this money back. No. I swear, please don't throw me in prison. I'll pay you back. And the king's moved with compassion, and he says to the guy, look, here's the deal. I'm going to graciously forgive your debt. You hurt me, and I'm going I'm going to absorb it and assume it. I'm not going to act like it didn't happen. I'm willfully choosing to eat it. You're forgiven. You owe me nothing. Go. Unbelievable. Dude leaves the king's presence, goes down the stairs of the castle, probably goes to a local pub or bar or someplace to celebrate with his wife and family or whatever, and he bumps into, on the way, this dude who owed him $25,000. That's a lot of money, isn't it? And he says to the dude, hey man, you got that money you owe me? And the guy says, no, dude. He says the same thing he just got through saying to his boss. No, be patient with me. I promise you I'll pay you back. And the man says to him, no. You pay me right now. He calls the cops. The cops come and arrest the man, and he says, throw him into prison until he pays me my $25,000. Now, come on, are you offended by that story? By what this guy just did? I mean, that's the kind of thing where you go, what are you doing? Well, news travels fast. They didn't have Twitter. They didn't have 24-hour news cycles. But the king found out in a hurry what had happened. He said, man, bring that dude back up in here. Guy comes back in the king's presence and he said, man, did you really just not forgive a guy a $25,000 debt? A lot now, a lot. Did you really just not forgive him and threw him in prison after I'd forgiven you $1 billion debt? And the guy said, yes, I did that. Now here's what Jesus said. Matthew 18, verse 34. And his Lord, moved with anger, he's telling this parable, this story, handed him over to the torturers until he should repay all that was owed him. Now he quit telling the story, and now Jesus is just talking on the real. He's just spitting facts. My heavenly Father will also do the same to you if each of you does not forgive his brother from your heart. Because we are the $1 billion debtors here. And yet God's telling us to forgive each other significant amounts here. But if we refuse to do it here and hold on to our offense, then God says you're cut off from experiencing the grace that I have for you. Do you understand why it's dangerous to hold on to offense? It ruins everything about you. You cut yourself off from God's grace and His healing, and it becomes your own torture. I Googled how many health problems are caused by bitterness. Right? That's what we're talking about today. How many health problems are caused by bitterness? The first article that came up was one from the Mayo Clinic. I respect the Mayo Clinic. I'm not in that field, but that name I recognize, and so I just read down through this article, and here's what the Mayo Clinic's experts tell us about what bitterness and offense holding in your heart actually does to you mentally and physically. You bring anger and bitterness into every relationship and new experience. You become so wrapped up in the wrong that you can't enjoy the present. You become depressed and anxious. You feel that your life lacks meaning or purpose, or that you are at odds with your spiritual beliefs, and you lose valuable and enriching connectedness to others. Can I just say, I thank God that the Mayo Clinic can confirm what God's been saying to us all along. God's been saying this to you all along. Let it go. So, if holding on to an offense is not a good thing, what's the solution? How do I let it go? Well, let's go back to Luke 17. I just read verse 1. We're going to read a couple more verses now. Luke 17, verse 1, again, he said to his disciples, it's inevitable that stumbling blocks come. You're going to get offended, but woe to him through whom they come. It would be better for him, the one who offends you, if a millstone were hung around his neck and he were thrown into the sea, than that he would cause one of these little ones to stumble. Now, two things. Little ones is not talking about kids. He's talking about people who are young in their faith. Because maturing faith gets this. But young people in faith, when you're immature, you hold on to offenses. And God's saying to you, listen, if you've been offended and you're holding on to it in an immature faith, let it go. God sees it. And he says, bro, I got this. Woe to the one who's bringing that pain on you. I got some pain I can bring too if they don't repent. Okay? Be better for them to have a millstone tied around their neck, thrown into the sea. God sees it. God's got it. But let's keep reading. But you be on your guard. You be on your guard. He's talking to his disciples. I get that not everybody's going to receive this word today, but if you call yourself a follower of Jesus, a disciple of Jesus, this is the call of God for you to surrender your pain and your self-will to His presence and His guidance. You be on your guard, eyes wide open, right? Be on your guard. If your brother sins, rebuke him, and if he repents, forgive him. And if he sins against you 7 times a day and returns to you 7 times saying, I repent, forgive him. Now, I like that part about rebuke him, don't y'all? If your brother sins, man, you go rebuke him, but it doesn't mean what you think it means. We think in our flesh it means, oh man, you go light him up, light him up, light him up. I'm finna give you some now, right? That's our flesh speaking, but the concept of reproof and rebuke in the Scripture is love enough to go be reconciled. Love enough. I love God. I love you. I love unity. I love peace. I love purpose that God brings to me. I'm even going to love my enemies. And out of that love that God has given, I want to seek to be reconciled with you. To say, look, this is what happened that hurt me, but I forgive you. And if he does it every day, 7 times a day, keep on forgiving. Why? God does not want you to take the bait and get trapped and be walled off and imprisoned and alone and lonely and in the devil's hand, being devoured more and more, and roots of bitterness that destroy everything about you. No, God says forgive. Forgive. Give grace. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 31 says, let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and slander be put away from you, along with all malice. Be kind to one another, tenderhearted, forgiving each other, just as God in Christ also has forgiven you. He's not saying you're never going to be hurt. He's saying you're going to be hurt, but don't hold on to the anger, bitterness, clamor, slander, malice, all that hate. Let it out. Give it to God. And you begin to give to them what God has given to you in Jesus. You know, the writer of Proverbs says a brother offended is harder to be won than a strong city, but he didn't say it's impossible. Come on, can I talk to you right now about your marriage or about your family dynamic? Can I talk to you about what's going on in your circle of friends? It may be hard, but it is not impossible. The devil's the one telling you it'll never be made right. His goal is to divide and devour. It's hard, but it's not impossible. Paul said, forgive. The devil's strategy is to divide and devour, so don't play his game. Get ahead of him and forgive in love, because Christ has done it for you. The writer of Hebrews says, man, look, don't let any bitter root grow up in you and cause trouble and many be defiled. But what did we say that was? Don't come short of the grace of God. God, you've been gracious to me and you have forgiven me $1 billion debt I could never pay. And so, God, because you've been gracious to me, Lord, help me to learn how to give grace to the people who are hurting me. Okay? Offense is not a good thing. Let's let it go by the grace and help of God. Now, across the room, every campus right now, can I just ask you, would you pray with me for a moment? I want to lead you to pray. And it helps me if I close my eyes to block out everybody else. Sometimes I bow my head just as a way of saying, God, I'm humbling myself before you. But would you just say to God right now, would you just pray, God, I need some help. Come on, it's just a humble prayer. You don't have to be fancy. But in the spirit of your heart, if the Spirit of God's been speaking to you, would you just pray, God, I need some help. God, I need you to forgive me for offending people because I've been offensive. And God, I need you to forgive me for holding on to my hurt. Come on, would you do it? God, I need you to help me. I need you to forgive me for what I have done. And God, I need you to forgive me for what I've held on to. This is painful. I get it. It's hard. I get it. To let go of offense is really, really hard because now you got to start healing. But it starts with just a humble place of saying, God, forgive me for what I've done and forgive me for holding on to my hurt. God, forgive me. That's not what you wanted for me. I've been playing the devil's game. He's been ruining me. Would you pray this? God, free me. God, forgive me, but then God, free me. If you were here, the first song we sang today said, He called my name and I ran out of that grave. It's a picture of the new life that Jesus is calling you to. Would you just say, God, free me from bitterness, free me from this hurt, free me from this prison, free me from this isolation. God, free me from the devil's hold. God, free me. Jesus, be my help. Holy Spirit, free me right now. Take it. I surrender to you. Would you pray again? God, help me. I can't do this, God. What I've been hearing, I want so badly, but God, I just don't think I can do it on my own. And listen, God doesn't want you to do it on your own. He wants you to receive His Spirit, receive His love. So right now, would you just do that in your heart? God, I receive grace, I receive love, I receive help, I receive your Spirit. Jesus, fill me up, help me, help me, help me. Be my strength, be my healing, help me. And now would you pray this? God, use me. When I leave church in a minute, when I turn this podcast off, God, would you help me to give love toward people who are hurting and broken and wounded and wounding? Lord, would you use me in my family, in my marriage, with my mom and dad, with my siblings? Would you use me at work? God, would you use me? I want to be a vessel of hope and help and light, a picture of your power to heal and to set free. God, to speak words of life. God, we want to be that in our culture. Would you just pray that? God, just use me. Heal me up. Fill me up. Pour me out, God, for you. In just a second, I'm going to close this time of prayer. We're going to sing a song of response where, listen, if you've never given your life to Christ, when we stand up, there are going to be some people who are going to be down around the front of the room or around the room. Look, when we stand up, you just step out and go to one of them, the people, they'll be there welcoming you. You just say, hey, look, I need God in my life. I need help. We'll pray with you. We'll help you take your next step. It may be that you have a burden that has nothing to do with what we've been talking about. You got a decision to make. You got something going on with your health or whatever. When we stand up, if you'll just step out and let us pray with you. I'm convinced that the power and the presence of God is released when we, by faith, take those steps. So would you do it? Father, we love you, and we declare to you in this moment that today's a day of healing. Today is a day of breakthrough. Today is a day of new beginnings. God, today is a day of freedom and life and love abounding in us. And so, God, we receive that and we declare it now. Lord, even as we stand to worship you, God, would you hear us from heaven? Would you let your Spirit fill our hearts, inhabit this place? And God, would you answer as we call? In the name of Jesus, amen.